Three, two, one. Welcome to the first edition of Anglican Unscripted for 2017. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm Gavin Ashenden.
This is episode 262, and today is January 12th, 2017. Okay, I have one of our favorite commentary people from England on, Gavin Ashenden, and we're going to talk about some recent controversy that's been going on, not in the Church of England, but in the Church of Scotland. As we had news, I guess it was January 7th, that somebody had read the Quran at the cathedral in Scotland during Epiphany.
Okay, we just need to say, Kevin, that it isn't the Church of Scotland, which is a Presbyterian church. It's the Scottish Episcopal Church. It's hard to
it is. Scottish Episcopal Church, the founding church of the Episcopal Church in America, USA. So that may make more sense here, yes. So tell me what happened, Kevin.
Well, the provost of of St Mary's, which is the Scottish Episcopal Church's cathedral, which is not the same as Glasgow Cathedral, which belongs to the Church of Scotland, decided to have a service to celebrate Epiphany. Quite right, all cathedrals have it. And at this particular service, he invited the Muslim community to come and read from the Quran. Now, he's done this before. And he's defended himself before. In fact, he's written a very moving blog saying that actually he got the idea from Justin Welby when he was dean at Liverpool at a Lent service where apparently some Muslims came into the Ash Wednesday service when Justin Welby was dean and mixed in with the congregation. And so Kevin Holdsworth, the provost at St Mary's Cathedral, said that here was a very good template for Christian-Muslim relations. And what he invited a young law student to read from the Quran. And they gave some thought to it because there's a surah in the Quran which describes Mary and Mary conceiving Jesus. And so if you wanted in a sort of kindergarten way to have a few readings about Mary from the Gospels and you choose a reading about Mary from the Quran, and everyone would be very happy and multicultural. The problem is
wait, there's a problem here.
It's just so ludicrous. It's hard to talk about with a straight face because this is a very famous chapter in the Quran, which sets out to deny the divinity of Jesus. Point blank, in your face, get lost Christians. You have invented it. Allah cannot have a son, and that's ayah 35.
Basically saying that, Christians, you are deceived. Here's the Mary story, and this is, the Islamic take on it. You're being deceived.
Yes, exactly that. And I guess if you don't read up to the bombshell verse, then you might get away with the fairy tale, everything is equal, all things are similar narrative, which lies behind the theology that inspires this kind of approach. But even if you didn't read that verse, you're still reading that chapter. It's still the Quran. The Quran still sets out to tell Christians that they are telling a false narrative about God, one that's been invented and is deceitful. So I don't think it makes very much difference. But as it happens, the Muslim law student in question went right on to this verse and gave it to them right between the eyes in Arabic, rubbed a hand, sat down and said, "Take that." And the Christian clergy said, "Isn't that lovely? How wonderful! How friendly we're all being! What a marvelous template for Christian-Muslim relations."
Well, I don't want to come off as blaming the Muslim community or Islam in any way. They were invited to give Surreal 19, and this is, the reading itself. They were invited to say this. I am a little offended that the provost would allow this. Is it okay to be offended?
Well, I think before I ever get to be offended, I'm flabbergasted. I mean,
Hmm.
I
Sure.
just can't get my head around the theological naivety of this, or short-sightedness. I mean, the word I'm trying to avoid using is stupidity, so I won't use it. I'll talk about
I,
naivety and short-sightedness. But the people who should be offended are not you and I, though we might be. But the people who should be offended are the Christians in Syria, who are putting together with their bare hands in the snows the churches that have been willfully destroyed by Islamic warriors who set out to destroy the blasphemy of Christianity and the churches that honor Jesus. They are the people who should be profoundly offended that Christians in the West are so uninformed or so programmed in an intellectual cul-de-sac, blind alley, that they could even conceive of setting out to do something like this. And which is one of the reasons why in the piece that I wrote, I said that I thought the prophets should apologize to them. Not to me, not to you. I don't need an apology, but apologize to Christians in the Middle East for this
Yeah, in the Middle East, the
short.
martyrs of old, the martyrs of new. I mean, yeah, this is more far-reaching than is easily understood just by looking at the context of what happened. You have a great relationship with some imams in your area. You were just in Paris, where you went to, were invited by Lebanese TV. Tell me about that relationship.
Well, I've met a number of imams over the years, and
Hmm.
they always present me with a theological problem, a problem of spiritual discernment. I've met some angry imams, some judgmental ones, and some ones that frightened me. And the ones I met in Paris 10 days ago were absolutely lovely and full of goodness and light and compassion. And it was just great being in their company. And we talked about the problem of Islamic violence in Europe, and they were 100% clear that the kind of Islam they understood was not an Islam that ought to fuel this violence. But how is it then that we can have imams who are full of genial kindness and goodness, and imams who preach murder? And the answer is because Islam itself has a certain kind of incoherence to it. And the major incoherence is that the Quran splits into two. I expect our listeners may know this, and if they do, I apologize for telling them things they've known for a long time. Um, One of the things that I did was at my university, a previous member of the faculty was a guy called Kenneth Cragg, and he was Bishop of Jerusalem and an academic and taught at my university. And I got him to come down and give a lecture just about year 2005 when he was about 90. And he gave this
Oh, wow.
wonderful lecture on Islam. And I said to him, Kenneth, can I come and talk to you at home in Oxford? And will you teach me about Islam? I mean, teach me more about it. And so I would go and visit him, sit at his feet in Oxford. Is that voice?
I think we lost your sound for a second. Can you tap your microphone on your computer?
I heard this huge
There we
rushing
go.
noise like it was a vacuum cleaner in the
Oh,
background.
okay. Yeah, when I don't talk for a while, and it doesn't happen often, this mic will start going, "What's going on? What's going on?" and pick up every noise what it can. Kevin's got to be there somewhere. No, I was listening. Rode microphone. I was listening, and then you go and do that. So you're talking about this relationship,
So
or you're
I
talking about
asked,
the university.
I asked Bishop Kenneth if I could come and talk to him in Oxford. And I used to visit him in Oxford. He was also the grandfather of one of my undergraduate students. And I learned some very interesting things from him. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand about the Quran is that the first half of the Quran has some fairly genial things to say about Jews and Christians, and it's the period when Muhammad was in Mecca, and he was getting on fairly well with the people of the book. He then had some political and military trouble, and he fled to Medina. And the second half of that period is where the bloodthirsty and violent, aggressive, uncompromising part of the Quran can be found. So in the Quran, we have a genial-ish first half and a pretty violent second half. Now, what that does is it allows Muslims to, just as Christians do in the gospel sometimes, to pick and choose between between texts that appeal to them. Well, okay, so that's a similar process. The problem is that there's a principle of interpretation called abrogation in Islamic theology, which says that if you have to choose between two verses, the one that takes precedence is the one that comes later in the Quran. And one of the reasons why we don't hear moderate Muslim voices having theological arguments with radical Islamic voices is because they know already the theological cards they hold in their hand don't count for as much as the violent theological cards held in radical Islam's hand. So what that means is that you can meet Muslims who are kind and generous and have a hunger for God in their heart, and whose hearts are full of charity. And they will feed from those parts of the Quran that feed those virtues. The problem that we have in the world today is that they don't have the theological power or authority to confront or contain violent Islam. And so violent Islam will always say, look, my surah comes later in the Quran than yours, and it takes precedence. And that's why we have this epistemological deficit, so to speak, between, if you like, nice Islam and violent Islam. And it's a great problem. But I think one of the things my explanation does, I hope, is to explain why one can find varieties of Muslims and varieties and tones of Islam. And apart from the fact, of course, you'll have many Muslims who don't take their Islam terribly seriously, in the sense that they'll go and say their prayers and they'll read bits from it, but they see no need to be radicalized or to put the kind of Islam that has swept through the world as a conquering force into practice.
No, agreed. Well, I want to thank you for your time. If you haven't seen the article, we just posted an article from Gavin on Anglican Ink that discusses his reaction. Do you expect at all that we'll get an apology for this, or is this just going to, for a person who's in a lot of trouble for conducting this service, he's done a remarkable job of not talking to anybody, and a lot of times that just lets things blow over. Do you think this will blow over?
Everything blows over.
Says the Englishman.
Most things blow over. The BBC contacted him, and he was busy explaining why he did what he did. And then they said to him, did you know that this was going to be read, this particular passage with this particular verse was going to be read? And he said no comment, which I think either means he didn't know, or he knew and he realized he's made a real mistake. I don't know what it takes to get a liberal clergyman to resign in Episcopal churches, but I think it takes more than a kind of temporary dust storm. So I doubt we'll get an apology. I doubt he'll resign. But what I hope will happen is that the whole episode will act as a catalyst for theological education, and that through it people will pick up the Quran, they'll look at this surah, they'll listen to the woman chanting it from the lectern in the cathedral, and they will make up their own minds, because there are two worldviews to choose between. One is the provost of St Mary's, Kevin Holsworth. He's gay, he's an LGBT activist. He has the classic progressive worldview. Everything is relative. The important thing is being nice, to affirm people in what they want, and hard objective truths are to be avoided at all costs. They might hurt you. He's not going to change his views. I doubt he'll apologize. He almost certainly won't resign. But what I hope this will do is to galvanize both Orthodox Christians and Christians who haven't quite got around to making up their mind or getting properly informed, who have taken a lot of their views from the media, which of course is almost always liberal and progressive and serving the egalitarian God that says there's no difference, all we have to have is aim for equality. I hope that Christians will see this and think through the issues a little more and begin to take up what is a very important struggle for the faith. Because in Europe and increasingly in America too, we have this three-cornered fight between Christianity and Christian civilization on one hand, cultural Marxism, the forces of secularism and progressiveness on the other, and Islam. And these three are struggling for the public space. And at the moment, Christianity appears to be losing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm in post-Christian Northeast. It didn't lose, it surrendered. I want to thank you, Gavin, for your time, and I will catch you on a future program soon, especially if things go crazy in Scotland. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm Gavin Ashton.